the UFC had just announced the White House card. And I'm going to lie to you guys, when Dana White was talking about this prior to announcing it, he said it was going to be 6, 7 title fights. And it was 2 title fights. Now, let's talk about the fights, okay? The main event is Justin Gaethje taking on Ilia Topuria. I like that fight. I think it's a great fight. I think the biggest thing, like off the top of my head, I think Ilia Topuria knocks him out. But I do see a world where Justin Gaethje can knock him out as well. But Ilia Topuria is so damn good and his IQ is really high and he can take a shot and he damn well can give a shot. But the other flip side of this, what makes me excited, is to see how Justin Gaethje approaches it after spending time with him playing football. Because when he was talking about Paddy Pimblett, he was like, well, Paddy can't kick, so I was okay going into his power. How will he approach this fight against Ilia Topuria, where someone who can kick and has a lot of power? And then in the co-main event, you have the interim heavyweight champion, Ciryl Gane. Well, there is no interim heavyweight champion. They're making an interim heavyweight champion because the heavyweight champion, Tom Aspinall, is still unable to defend his belt. So they have Alex Pereira taking on Ciryl Gane. This is an interesting fight. This is, you know, we have 2 strikers coming to fight. We have Ciryl Gane, who is definitely the bigger athlete, who's very good about avoiding getting hit. He has a side karate stance. Taking on Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira, you know, the former world champion in the middleweight division and the light heavyweight division, and also Glory kickboxing champion. That should be an interesting fight just because it's Alex Pereira going up to heavyweight and see how he does against guys.
He's going to lose to Ilia Topuria in the main event in the White House. If he pulls it off, it'll be cinema, okay? And I'll assume that the rig is in. And Topuria has been paid $10 million to make the US look good on the world stage. Because Gaethje, he's the All-American. He's red, white, bleeds red, white, and blue, brother. You know what I mean? He's going to be there. He's the only American that's even in conversations to ever be in a title fight. Unless they did Yan O'Malley too. Which people would still complain about, by the way, but it's the only
See, maybe I'm being a sourpuss Sally. Maybe I'm just being a bit of a pessimist. But the UFC's White House card was just announced, and for what we were promised, this is a massive letdown. And I'm gonna explain why this had every opportunity to bring the UFC back to prominence, to stake their claim once again as the combat sports outlet across boxing, MMA, and everything in between. And they fumbled it. Not because they had to, not because there was no other way to do it, but because the UFC is in a place right now where this is the product. And I guess there is no fighting it anymore. You just have to get used to it. What do I mean? The breakdown. Let's go. Let's contextualize this, right? For the last however many months, Dana White, who sat down with me, who sat down with other people, who had talked about the UFC White House card, had essentially said that this would be like the UFC Sphere on steroids, right? UFC Freedom 250 is what they're calling it. And yeah, you know, if you mention steroids in a UFC card, how do you not have John Jones involved? We'll get to that in a second. But Dana and the entire UFC and the teases that have come from being this, you know, insane, massive card, putting it together, how it was gonna blow everything out of the water, it was gonna be badass and all this. The hype around this has been ridiculous. And it's given you a sense of like, oh man, something big is coming. Something, you know, along the lines of a UFC 100, 200, 300, or like when, again, you know, Conor McGregor Habib was announced. Conor McGregor came back to the Donald Cerrone fight was announced. When Jorge Masvidal fought Nate Diaz for the BMF, when George St. Pierre came back at UFC 217, it had that kind of feel to it. And I think that's the biggest problem I have right now, was the hype did not match the delivery. This is like ordering Domino's pizza and somehow Little Caesars is delivered. You don't know how it got there. It's definitely not what you asked for. It's clearly not what you were promised, but it's pizza, so you'll eat it. This is kind of how I feel about the UFC White House card. But without further ado, here it is. Drum roll, please. Okay, UFC Freedom 250. And honestly, this isn't a bad card, okay? Because you have Ilia Topuria versus Justin Gaethje for the World Lightweight Championship. I have my problems there, but okay. Champion versus interim champion, do your deal. Then the co-main event, Alex Pereira versus Ciryl Gane for the interim heavyweight championship. Okay, Alex Pereira making his way up to heavyweight. We knew this was coming when he dropped the strap at 205. Ciryl Gane, I have my problems with it. We'll come back to it in a second.
All right, friends, big breaking news on this Saturday, March 7th. UFC 326 is actually happening as I'm recording this right now, but at approximately 10 p.m. Eastern time, our long international nightmare came to an end. Why? Because the UFC finally announced the White House card. They're calling it UFC Freedom 250. Of course, July 4th will be the United States' 250th birthday. Obviously, this event is happening on June 14th, a Sunday night, which just so happens to be the president's birthday, and they finally announced it, and so now we can talk about it. The main event is in fact going to be Ilia Topuria versus Justin Gaethje for the lightweight title, a unification bout. Of course, Gaethje won that belt back on January 24th. Ilya is the man. He won that belt in June of last year, and he's coming back to fight in the main event of the White House card. So it's Spain/Georgia versus the United States on June 14th. That's the main event. The co-main event is Alex Pereira moving up to heavyweight to fight Cyril Gane for the interim heavyweight title. More on that in a moment. Also on the card, I'm reading this because I don't want to mess it up. Sugar Sean O'Malley against Ayman Zahabi. So that's the United States versus Canada. By the way, Pereira, Brazil versus France. So there's one fight that doesn't feature an American, although he does live in Connecticut and sort of feels like an adopted American at this point. Michael Chandler does end up on the card. He goes up against Mauricio Hufi. Bo Nickel versus Kyle Dawkins, America versus America, and Steve Garcia versus Diego Lopez. They love Diego Lopez. He's getting this opportunity after just getting a chance to fight for the belt. So in the end, as I told you, 6 fights, 2 title fights. It was not the 7 to 8 title fights as was initially promised. It's a marquee main event. I know that there are some people who are upset. I know that there are some people who are trying to say like, hey, this is a letdown. This is an incredible 6-fight card, and it was never going to be 7 to 8 title fights. That was never going to happen. That would screw up the rest of their schedule. Ilia Topuria coming back against Justin Gaethje is a massive, massive fight. It is a marquee fight. It is one of the biggest fights of the year. Topuria coming back after everything he's been through, almost exactly.
The White House fight card just became official, and I'm telling you right now, this is the most insane thing that's ever happened in combat sports history. We're talking about professional MMA fights on the White House lawn. Let that sink in for a second. The most powerful building in America is about to host cage fights, and the entire MMA world has completely lost their minds over this announcement. Top fighters, legendary analysts, even former champions are all scrambling to break down what this means for the sport. This isn't just another UFC card getting moved to a fancy venue. This is the kind of event that rewrites the history books and changes everything we thought we knew about how big this sport could actually get.
Dana, you talked about you don't want to say what fight fell out, which is fair enough, but there is obviously...
Well, there's weird circumstances around it that we probably shouldn't talk about.
Okay. There is speculation, of course, that it's John Jones.
No,
right?
it's not.
Was John
Ever, which I told you guys 100,000 times, was John Jones even remotely in my mind to fight at the White House. I wouldn't. First of all, I've told you why I wouldn't do it. And number 2, some guy with meta glasses on filmed him talking about his hips, that his hips are so bad. And I don't know if you guys saw that flag football game where he can barely run. John Jones he retired because of his hips. He's got arthritis in his hips. Apparently he's been doctors say he should have hip replacement.
And here's where it gets absolutely wild. The second this announcement dropped, everyone immediately started asking about John Jones. Of course they did. Because whenever there's a massive card, Jones' name gets thrown around like he's some kind of MMA fairy godmother who might magically appear. But Dana White shut that down faster than a John Jones eye poke. He didn't even hesitate or try to build suspense around it. White straight up said there were concrete reasons why Jones wouldn't be anywhere near this card. And honestly, that tells you everything you need to know about the behind-the-scenes drama that's still following the so-called pound-for-pound king around like a bad smell.
That on top of all the other reasons that I wouldn't. The John Jones thing is bullshit. I'm not saying they weren't talking to John Jones and that John Jones wasn't interested in the fight. And what was even crazier is John Jones came out and was like, I'm in negotiations right now for the White House fight, after I had already sent a text to his lawyer saying,
Now let's talk about the absolute monster who's actually headlining this historic event. Joe Rogan and his commentary team were breaking down Ilia Toporia's upcoming fight with Justin Gaethje, and when Rogan starts geeking out over someone's skills, you better pay attention. He went back to Toporia's demolition of Charles Oliveira, and listen, that wasn't just a win. That was a masterclass in violence that left even seasoned analysts speechless. Rogan described it as the kind of performance that separates the good fighters from the truly dangerous ones, emphasizing that we're watching someone who operates on a completely different level than everyone else in the division. The technical precision, the raw power, the fight IQ, everything about Topuria screams once-in-a-generation talent, and now he's about to showcase all of that on the biggest stage in combat sports history.
Okay, so Justin Gaethje, we were just talking about the White House card there. It's now official. You're headlining with Ilia Topuria for Undisputed. Congratulations. That is huge. You didn't reveal the news when you came and sat with us earlier. We won't take offense, but...
No, I didn't know. I wasn't sure.
No, you didn't know.
I was not sure.
Hold on, you're saying that when they made the announcement, that was a surprise to you.
That was 100% confirmation that I was the main event. I didn't know that. I didn't know who the co-main event, or if I was the co-main event, or who the other fight was at the time.
I should have known something was up when they came in my ear. They said, ask Justin 2 questions. Don't talk about what's next for him. Don't talk about the next fight. Don't talk about the White House. I should have saw it coming.
They know I'm too honest.
But here's what's crazy about Justin Gaethje's side of this story. Even after all the negotiations and behind-the-scenes conversations, Gaethje admits he wasn't completely sure he'd actually landed this main event slot until the moment it became public knowledge. Think about that for a second. Here's a guy who's been in wars with some of the most dangerous fighters on the planet, and even he had that moment of disbelief when he realized he was about to headline the most unprecedented card in MMA history. The confirmation hit him like a freight train, turning excitement into full-blown anticipation as he started to grasp the magnitude of what he just signed up for. This isn't just another title fight. This is the kind of opportunity that defines entire careers and cements legacies in ways that regular championship bouts simply can't touch.
About this matchup with Ilia.
Yeah, I mean, just, I've obviously thought about it, him being the champion, me being the guy that wants to be the champion, but I don't technically have a breakdown right now. My coach already has it. I guarantee if my coach was here, he would talk your ear off about what the plan is, but I am excited to figure out the puzzle that is Ilia Topuria. He's a great boxer. His 2-3 is the nicest 2-3 I may have ever seen in this sport, and he's a dangerous dude. So I'm excited to showcase my skills. I showcased through the many experiences that I can fight different styles of fights. We know that styles make matchups, and I'm going to...
When it comes to actually preparing for someone like Topuria, Gaethje is being refreshingly honest about the challenge ahead of him. He's still putting together what he calls the perfect strategy. And honestly, that's probably the smartest approach when you're dealing with someone as well-rounded and unpredictable as the undefeated Georgian. Gaethje has been studying tape, breaking down patterns, looking for any possible opening he can exploit. But he recognizes that Topuria seems to have answers for everything opponents throw at him. Here's what makes this fascinating, though. Gaethje says he's actually eager to solve this puzzle, to crack the code that is Ilia Topuria, and prove that his own versatility and adaptability can overcome even the most complete fighters in the division. With the stakes higher than ever on this White House stage, he's determined to leave everything in that octagon and show the world why he belongs in this spotlight.
How this fight come about? Here's the God-honest truth. I told UFC, I would love to fight at the White House. I will fight anybody at the White House. I will fight Ilia. I will fight Islam. I will fight Habib. No, but for real, I said I want to fight on the White House card. Please let me fight on the White House card. I don't care who it is. I want to be on there. I want the opportunity to, I fought at the Sphere, which was really cool. The White House, I think there's 6 fights on the White House card. There's me plus 11 other people that get to make the walk from the Oval Office. That's what they're saying. You walk from the Oval Office into the White House lawn, and it's it's honestly hard to even wrap your head around. It doesn't even feel like it's reality. Once in a lifetime opportunity. America versus Canada. I'm pretty sure we whooped their ass in hockey. Don't really watch it, but I heard that's true. But USA versus Canada makes sense. I like it. I'm happy. I'm excited. 14 weeks, plenty of time. I'm pretty sure it's on a Sunday, June 14th. that Trump's birthday? Some shit?
And get this, Sean, O'Malley made it crystal clear that fighting on the White House card was absolutely impossible to pass up. The young star didn't care who he faced. Didn't matter if it was a ranked contender or someone coming off a loss. He just wanted to step onto that historic stage and be part of something that'll be talked about for decades. Picture this for a second. Walking from the Oval Office onto the White House lawn to compete in a professional MMA fight. O'Malley said he didn't care who it was, he just wanted to be on that card, and you can hear the genuine excitement in his voice when he talks about it. With only a handful of fighters getting to share that once-in-a-lifetime spotlight, performing in front of a backdrop that represents American power and history, he admits it's an opportunity that's almost too big to fully grasp. For O'Malley, this isn't just another fight on his record, and it's definitely not just another paycheck. This is a moment that could define his entire career and cement his place in MMA history in ways that regular title defenses simply can't.
So I feel amazing. This is a great opportunity for me. I worked so hard for staying the big cards in UFC. Now UFC sending me the chance to fight the White House. And yeah, this is a great opportunity for my career, for the future. I tell for my family, my brothers, my friends. Like yeah, when I stay in UFC, I fight in the great.
Diego Lopez is equally thrilled to be part of this White House event, and his perspective adds another layer to why this card matters so much beyond just the sport itself. He calls it an incredible opportunity that could genuinely shape the trajectory of his career and provide for his family in ways that other fights just can't match. Think about what that means for a fighter like Lopez, sharing this historic stage with some of the sport's biggest names, fighters he's watched and studied for years, is both an honor he doesn't take lightly and a genuine chance to leave his mark in MMA history. He's not just competing for a paycheck or rankings position. He's fighting to be remembered as someone who competed at the White House when the UFC made history, and that kind of motivation can make dangerous fighters even more dangerous.
On Justin Gaethje for the undisputed lightweight championship of the world. Also, I didn't expect this one. Alex Pereira, he's on the card. I expected that. I thought versus John Jones, but no. John Jones is not on the card. It is Alex Pereira taking on Cyril Gane, obviously from France, obviously just fought for the undisputed title against Tom Aspinall. Sadly, that fight ended because of the eye poke. But this is the world we're living in, and that is a crazy fight, man, because Pereira, Cyril Gane, two of the best kickboxers that we've seen in the UFC. Simple as that. So that is very interesting, and it's just a great fight. I mean, two big, powerful strikers. Pereira with the power, Gane with the movement, very, very light on the feet. Excited for that one. Michael Chandler's on the card. Who was he taking on? Maurizio Hufi? I think it was Hufi. Maurizio Hufi, I'm trying to remember. Eamon Zahabi back on there versus Sugar Sean O'Malley. Michael Chandler versus Hufi. Bo Nickel taking on Kyle Dorcas, which is a bit of a... I expected Bo Nickel.
Michael Bisping couldn't hide his excitement when breaking down this newly announced White House card. And when Bisping gets hyped, you know something special is brewing. He highlighted the main event between Topuria and Gaethje for the undisputed lightweight title as an absolute banger that could steal Fight of the Year honors before the year even ends. But here's what caught my attention. Bisping called the Alex Pereira versus Cyril Gane matchup a clash between two of the absolute best kickboxers in the entire UFC roster. Guys who can knock you out with technique as much as raw power. Bisping also noted the impressive depth of this card beyond just the headliners, pointing out Michael Chandler's return and surprise matchups like Bo Nickel versus Kyle Dorcas that people weren't expecting to see. He described the whole thing as stacked with power, skill, and fights that fans will legitimately be talking about for years whenever they discuss the greatest cards in UFC history.
Peak of the peak, the best card we've ever seen, and a position has been reserved for Bo Nickel versus Kyle Dorcas, and then we've also got Diego Lopez versus Steve Garcia. Some amazing fights, but we can do better than this. We can do better than this. I've made my own White House card, which isn't in fairy tale land, like a lot of people's White House cards were, because we're going to go through that in today's video as well. But we can do better than this. Bo Nickel versus Kyle Dorcas is not a matchup where you're like, we've got to save this for the White House card. Put it in the Apex. Put it in a crowded arena on the Adesanya Piper co-main event of UFC Fight Night Seattle. To save this to be in special reservation for the White House card, in my opinion, is insane. Absolutely insane. But these are amazing fights. I do want to mention though, this card was hyped up to be the best thing we've ever seen.
Now here's where things get interesting. MMA Guru weighed in with his typically analytical and sometimes controversial perspective on these matchups. While he praised certain fights like Nickel versus Dawkhouse and Lopez versus Steve Garcia as solid matchups that make competitive sense, he argued that some bouts don't actually need the White House spotlight to be appreciated. He suggested they'd shine just as bright, maybe even brighter, on a regular UFC fight night where they could be the main attraction rather than buried in the middle of a stacked card. Even with a few questionable placements that had him scratching his head about the UFC's decision-making process, Guru admitted there's absolutely no denying that this card is shaping up to be one of the most talked-about events in the sport's history. Something that transcends normal promotional cycles and becomes part of combat sports lore.
But let's be honest, this is a fucking sick card, okay? That's the problem, but it's the UFC 300 problem, where Dana White sells us these fucking fairy tales. We're gonna have 7 title fights on the card, we're hearing. At one point during the build-up of all of this White House card talk. 7 title fights? That must be why the UFC cards have been so shit recently. Like this one with Oliveira versus Holloway, which had a co-main event of Baralho versus Derrida, and for some reason some of these other fights are on the main card. Oh wow, Font versus Rosas Jr. The pay-per-views have been suffering recently, and we haven't really had any stacked cards because we thought the UFC was holding out to just put all of the major matchups on this White House card. But let's be honest, I'll get into that other stuff in a second and we'll trash it enough. Topuria versus Gaethje and Pereira versus Gane on the same night.
But wait, it gets even more complex. MMA Guru calls the White House card absolutely sick in terms of potential and star power, but admits it comes with what he describes as the classic UFC 300 problem, overhyped expectations that don't always live up to the impossible standards created during the build-up. With rumors initially floating around of 7 title fights and multiple high-profile matchups that got everyone salivating, he notes that some fights feel oddly placed when you really examine the card structure. This leaves hardcore fans questioning whether the UFC has been strategically holding back some of the biggest matchups just for this historic card, rather than booking them when they made the most competitive sense. Still, despite these minor gripes and the tendency to overanalyze every booking decision, he admits the sheer star power and depth of talent on display make it absolutely impossible not to be genuinely excited about what's going to happen when these fighters step into the octagon on the White House lawn. Here's where the analysis gets really deep. Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, one of the greatest fighters to ever compete, highlighted the explosive potential of the main event between Topuria and Gaethje with the kind of high-level fighting IQ you'd expect from a legend. He pointed out that while Topuria might be favored by many analysts to score a knockout given his recent performances and finishing ability, Gaethje absolutely has the power and experience to turn the fight around in a single exchange. This makes the matchup genuinely unpredictable and thrilling in a way that only the best fights can be. Johnson also broke down the co-main event with surgical precision, noting the striking showdown between Alex Pereira and Cyril Gane. He emphasized Gane's significant size advantage, his elite athleticism, and his evasive style that's frustrated so many opponents, all pitted against Pereira's absolutely devastating raw power that's put multiple fighters to sleep. This sets the stage for what could be an absolute striking masterclass that hardcore fans will be dissecting for months afterward. And here's what nobody else is talking about. Johnson shared some alternative matchups he personally would have liked to see on a card of this magnitude, and his suggestions reveal just how deep the talent pool really is right now. While he acknowledged the fight between Shavkat Rakhmonov and Bilal Mohammed is solid and makes competitive sense, Johnson admitted he was actually hoping for a clash with Corey Sandhagen instead, which would have brought a completely different stylistic dynamic to the card. He also suggested swapping out some other bouts, like replacing Nickel versus Dawkhouse with fights that feature bigger names and more mainstream appeal, potentially including a matchup with Charles Oliveira somewhere on the card to add even more star power and excitement to an already stacked lineup. These insights show you just how many incredible fights are sitting on the table right now, waiting for the right moment and the right stage. But here's where Ariel Helwani brings some much-needed perspective to cut through all the hype. Always the voice of reason in the MMA media landscape, Demetrius reminded fans not to get too caught up in the promised 7 or 8 title fights that was never going to be realistic from a logistical standpoint. When you consider championship availability, medical clearances, and the actual pool of ready contenders, that level of stacking was pure fantasy from the beginning. But Topuria stressed that the card still delivers a genuinely marquee main event, with Topuria taking on Gaethje in what is legitimately one of the biggest fights of the entire year, regardless of where it takes place. He also highlighted Alex Gaethje making the bold move up to heavyweight to challenge Cyril Gane, seeing this as a clear path toward an eventual showdown with Tom that could unify the heavyweight titles, and praised the UFC for keeping the interim title situation intact rather than creating more divisional chaos. Hold up, because there's some behind-the-scenes drama that casual fans have no idea about, but that really shaped how this card came together. Helwani revealed that Michael Chandler finally landed a spot on the card after weeks of uncertainty about his fighting future, which tells you just how fluid these negotiations were right up until the announcement. He praised Bo Nickel as a standout addition, whose inclusion makes perfect sense given his rising star power, and called the bout between Garcia and Lopez a fun scrap that should deliver action even if it's not the most high-stakes matchup on paper. But here's the kicker, Helwani also revealed that talks for a potential Alex Pereira versus John Jones superfight actually fell through over financial disagreements between Jones and the UFC. Think about that. We were potentially one negotiation away from something even bigger than what we're getting. This shows how close we came to an absolutely mind-blowing card, while highlighting how quickly the Topuria versus Gaethje fight came together once negotiations began in earnest, demonstrating the UFC's impressive ability to lock in marquee matchups when all parties are motivated to make a deal happen. So there you have it. The White House card is officially set, featuring fights that could reshape multiple divisions and create moments that'll be replayed for decades. We're talking about professional MMA fights on the lawn of the most powerful building in America, with fighters who recognize this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to cement their legacies. From Topuria and Gaethje's title war to Pereira's heavyweight gamble to rising stars like O'Malley and Nickel getting their shot at history, this card represents something we've never seen before and may never see again. The question isn't whether this will be memorable, it's whether it'll live up to the absolutely insane expectations everyone's building around it. What do you think about this historic White House card? Did the final lineup live up to all the hype and speculation? Or are you disappointed they couldn't pull off some of those dream matchups we were all hoping for? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I genuinely want to know what you think about these fights. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell for all the latest MMA breakdowns, fighter interviews, and insider information as we cover every angle of this unprecedented event. I'll see you in the next one. But before we wrap this up completely, let me hit you with some absolutely mind-blowing details that most people are completely missing about what this White House card actually represents for the future of combat sports. This isn't just a one-off publicity stunt or some random political photo opportunity that'll be forgotten next month. Industry insiders are already whispering that this could be the beginning of a completely new era where major sporting events regularly take place at historically significant venues around the world. Think about the precedent this sets. If you can successfully host professional MMA fights on the White House lawn, what's stopping other countries from hosting cards at the Colosseum in Rome, or outside Buckingham Palace, or at other iconic locations that would make every sports fan lose their absolute minds? The financial implications alone are staggering when you really break down what's happening here. Sources close to the negotiations are saying the fighter payouts for this card are unlike anything we've seen before, with even preliminary card fighters getting main event money just for the privilege of competing at this historic venue. But it goes way beyond just the immediate paychecks. The global media attention and marketing opportunities from this single event could generate more long-term value for these fighters' personal brands than years of regular UFC appearances combined. We're talking about international news coverage, documentary deals, book opportunities, and endorsement possibilities that simply don't exist for fighters competing on regular cards, no matter how good the fights actually are. And here's something that's flying completely under the radar, but could be the most important aspect of this entire event. The security logistics for hosting professional fights at the White House required unprecedented cooperation between the UFC, Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security, and multiple other federal agencies that have never had to coordinate anything like this before. Think about what that means. They had to completely reimagine how to secure a combat sports event where fighters are literally throwing strikes at each other, while maintaining the same security standards required for protecting the most important building in American government. The planning process alone took months of meetings, background checks, and security protocols that make regular UFC events look like backyard barbecues in terms of complexity and coordination. But wait, there's more controversy brewing that nobody's talking about yet. Several international athletic commissions are already questioning whether fights held on federal government property should count toward official rankings and championship recognition, arguing that mixing politics with professional sports creates precedents that could compromise the integrity of athletic competition. Some fighters who weren't selected for the card are privately expressing frustration that their careers could be impacted by what they see as a publicity stunt rather than merit-based matchmaking. Meanwhile, other promotions like Bellator and One Championship are reportedly exploring their own historic venue partnerships, trying to capitalize on the attention this White House card is generating and prove they can create equally memorable events without needing UFC-level resources and political connections. The ripple effects are already spreading throughout the entire MMA ecosystem in ways that most fans haven't even considered yet. Smaller regional promotions are reporting increased interest from venues that previously never considered hosting combat sports, with everyone from museums to historic landmarks suddenly inquiring about the possibility of hosting their own unique fight cards. Fighter managers are completely restructuring contract negotiations to include clauses about historic venue opportunities, recognizing that these types of events could become regular occurrences that significantly impact their clients' earning potential and career trajectories. Even MMA gyms across the country are using this White House card as a recruiting tool, telling potential students that the sport has officially reached the highest levels of American society and cultural acceptance.